All right, so we are connecting there. So, João, tell me your thoughts, the difference between education and entrepreneurship. Uh, I mean, we could talk 45 minutes on this, but just kind of a high level thought. What do you think?
Well, there's a one really important commonality between, work as an educator and work as an entrepreneur which is the power of communication. It's like you really have to build a coalition of goodwill around you. Lots and lots of people have to buy into your vision and believe your dream for a startup to be able to succeed. And so that ability to entice people, to communicate your vision, to bring people from where they are today to where you would love them to be, that is common to the job of a startup founder and an educator or a professor, which was my previous life before starting Veniam. And so I would say that it was really great training for me as a startup founder before to have had an academic career, where also one thing that people forget is that often you think about a professor as a teacher, but a professor is most of all also a researcher, asking questions and trying to solve complex problems. And so that's that side as well. And as a professor, I also had the opportunity to actually do a couple of startups within academia. One was an international master's program in Germany, which was taught completely in English. And that was like at the beginning of my career. I actually scaled that program up to 700 candidates for 30 places and sponsorship by German companies. My second startup within academia was the Institute for Telecommunication in Porto, which grew from 5 people to 100 people within 5 years. And then I also had the privilege to work with the Portuguese government on an international partnership between Portuguese universities and Carnegie Mellon, which at the time had a budget of about $77 million over 5 years. And so I got to actually also build out that program, touching the lives, of hundreds of researchers, professors, and students. And so, by the time I actually started companies, I already had some experience in building organizations and building teams and pursuing our dreams in one way or the other.
Wow. Okay. So we are set for a killer show because the biggest problem that I see right now is that you are not duplicated into 100 million different people that are all the same doing that in academia, because we need educators to be entrepreneurs and to rattle the cages of these institutions that are based on, the 1600s. But in each of those startup stories in education, there was scale. And that is what we're here today to talk about, is scaling. And not about scaling educational startups. We're talking about Scaleups. We're talking about Veniam, your company, which you are the CEO of. Ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce, wait for it, João Barros. Yes, no?
About 80% there. But you're
I will take an 80. I will take an 80%. You know what? You don't have to be great at the start, but you have to start to be great. So if I say your name like 5-10 more times, I'm going to get up to that 99%. So today we're gonna talk and really pick your brain on the lessons learned as you've started and scaled Veniam, your company. And we are here on the Scaleup Valley podcast, where we talk with Scaleup heroes, the people who are behind the scenes with the capes. I don't see that you have your cape on today. That's very humble of you.
Only comes out at night. So
good. No, I'm glad that that you're so humble. As you know, the Superman that we don't see. We're talking with Clark. But really, the idea here is to share your experiences, your insights, your anecdotes, so that people can learn from it. Now, my name is Ryan Foland, for those of you who don't know me, and I love to speak about simplicity. So I'm going to be taking notes on little pieces of paper, and I'm going to chirp in where I see fit, and I'm going to come in with a recap in the end. But for now, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Mike, who also has spent a lot of time in Porto. Mike, the mic is yours.
So it's a good point. Thanks, Brian. Thanks so much, João, for joining us today. Really privileged to talk to you and to learn from you. And let's start with your story. You were already sharing it behind the scenes and where we were going live, but let us go through the beginnings of your life very quickly until you get to startup Veniam, or Veniam, sorry. Now I'm in English mode, Veniam.
Sure thing. So before starting Veniam, I actually had an academic career as a professor of electrical and computer engineering. So I've been working on wireless networks for about 20 years now. And specifically, we started looking at networks of moving things as part of our research program in 2005. By 2008, 2009, we started building networks of vehicles. And that's when we realized, that vehicles can be a lot more than just machines that carry people from one point to the other. They can actually be part of the wireless infrastructure, providing free internet for people, but most of all, by meshing with each other, being able to communicate with each other and with the internet, they can actually move massive amounts of data, not just to improve our mobility system, but actually just in general pick up tons of useful data to improve the quality of life and the safety of our cities. And so that became our purpose as a company in Veniam, is to make places more human by maximizing the utility of vehicles. So enabling them, to provide mobility as a service, so that we go from, just 5% utilization to 70, 80% of utilization. And preferably one day, mobility will be provided as a service by fleets of autonomous vehicles that have to move huge amounts of data to be able to operate. And that's precisely the problem that Veniam solves. All of this came from, 15 years of research. And then one day, Portugal was actually in a pretty tough situation because of the financial crisis, which hit us badly in 2011. Students were getting, quite depressed and thinking, oh, we have to immigrate or to be able to get good jobs. And so I felt, that now is the time for us to take all the amazing technology that students were developing in the university and actually bring it to the market. And once I mentioned this to them, you could really see, the level of enthusiasm rising. And I said, January 2012 we'll start, and I had no idea how to do it. But that's exactly what we did. We started a couple of companies, and then Veniam got funded, and we just celebrated our 7th year last week.
Congratulations. And before asking a little bit more about the stage of the company in terms of scale, maybe I would introduce the framework that we always use to guide our conversations with Scaleup leaders and Scaleup CEOs. And as you already have been using this framework, which is the Scaling Up framework, it would be even better if you could just quickly explain what is this Scaleup with this framework about. Please.
So we were very lucky to actually be part of a program that was also sponsored by our city, by Porto. Porto has, a growing ecosystem of startups and scale-ups. Porto in particular specialized on supporting scale-ups with, very interesting programs that join our business school and our entrepreneur association and the city itself. As part of the program, I actually got to meet Vern Harnish and have an intensive workshop. And I took our entire leadership team there. And it was quite a mind-changing experience. We just realized, hey, there's obviously every company is a different company. Every business is different, but there are like commonalities on how companies grow, and there's enough evidence from thousands of companies on things that work really well and things that we don't know if they work, and things that we know that won't work, and so. I came back from that workshop, bought the Scaleup book, and basically, had about 20 copies, and I started handing them out to our managers. And we started, step by step, introducing some of the best practices that are in the book and adapting it to some of the things that we needed to achieve, realizing, what works well for us. Also, particularly in terms of our execution and our clarity around our strategy and purpose, and who who we are, why we do things, and how we want to operate. And so it was tremendously valuable to know, that there's a system that we can follow to actually implement. We are engineers. We're very much a tech company and a hard tech company, and so for us, having a methodology that is measurable and that we could use to implement those changes in the company was extremely valuable. And so, but it's also a lot of work. So that's the other thing that people have to realize. But I think it greatly contribute to the clarity of our strategy and direction, to the improvements in execution. I believe we still have a lot to learn and a lot to improve, but I think we created a culture that enables this continuous improvement, and a lot of unity around the purpose.
Got it. And already using some of the terminology of the framework. So, what is your big, airy, audacious goal? Your long-term vision for Veniam? I know that you were able to quantify it in a way that is very difficult, and it's a process to get it even more, as you said, clear and clear. So, what is the BAC of Veniam nowadays?
So, in 8 to 10 years, we want our software to be in 100 million vehicles, and we say if 100 million Veniamized vehicles, and Veniamized vehicles are vehicles that use Veniam's platform to maximize their utility. And so that means the vehicles that with our intelligent networking software are able to talk to each other and to the internet and move massive amounts of data, and therefore provide new connected vehicle services and new connected vehicle applications. But that critical number we want to achieve is 100 million vehicles, and we're well on track because we're now working with several of the largest automakers in the world, and they produce overall the total addressable market by 2021 is about 90 million connected vehicles per year coming out of the factory. And our pipeline now is roughly at 40 million. So in 3 to 5 years, we want to be in 5 million vehicles, and that scales then really fast once every year, you get into production with each one of these auto OEMs. It can be anywhere from 4 to 10 million per automaker. And so that will, get us to our BHAG. And so we're well on track to achieve that.
So you can see how clear and measurable it is. The very long-term vision, which is really very long-term, but at the same time so specific, which is quite amazing.
Yeah, and it's actually only one part of the opportunity. So Veniam as a company owns a patent portfolio of about 180 patents that covers networks of moving things. So not just cars and autonomous vehicles, but also drones, robots, industrial machines. But we realized as part of the Scaleup framework that it was really important to be laser sharp focused on the one market segment where we believe we can have the fastest growth, and that was the automotive side. Eventually, we will have to make a decision on how to monetize the rest of our IP, whether we create other business units for different verticals, or whether we license our IP for others to build products and businesses for these other verticals. But right now, we're 100% laser sharp focused on getting our intelligent networking software into the automotive industry.
Super interesting. And in terms of the size of the team, so how many people do you have at Veniam?
So right now we're 57 people, and we expect to be 100 by the end of this year.
And finally, to give also context, so what are some of your investors and the amount you raised so far?
Yeah, so far we raised $45 million in venture capital. Our Series A was led by True Ventures in Silicon Valley, which has done Fitbit, Ring, several other companies like that, and Union Square Ventures, which is well known for Twitter, Tumblr, Twilio. And basically, we've been blessed to actually be part of not only of their portfolio as investors, but also of this community of incredible startups and scale-ups and founders from whom we've learned a lot as well. And you can see, that even though the businesses and teams and companies are totally different, and the cultures sometimes are totally different, having very, very clear goals and having great alignment among all the different parts of the company has been critical for all of those that have been successful.
And the way, let's move a little bit forward and start mixing the conversation between strategy and people. So in terms of the locations where your customers are now focused on the automotive industry, so usually where are the geographic markets where you are more present, and how do you distribute the team to kind of serve those customers and at the same time be able to produce the IP to serve them?
Well, one of the triggers from the Scaleup program was actually that we decided to actually change our focus along the way. So initially we had as a product a combination of hardware and software, and so we had these onboard units that we would put in buses, trucks, and so on. We built the first mesh network of vehicles and the largest one in the world here in Porto, Portugal first, with all the buses, garbage collection trucks, and so on. And then we also started deploying similar networks in Singapore, in New York, in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And about 2 years ago, we started getting a lot of traction from the automotive industry in terms of auto OEMs wanting to incorporate our technology in new vehicles coming out of the factory. And by the time, I started using the Scaleup methodology to manage the company, we were actually still under the illusion that we could actually do both. And then we realized that it was really, really, really hard for people to be serving two very different markets, the fleets and the automakers. And so we had to make the hard, tough decision to actually shut down one of the businesses to be able to focus 100% on the other one. So that was probably the most difficult decision that I made since starting the company, because we had business in the other. It was not growing and scaling as fast as we would like, and the sales cycle with the fleets was really, really long. So that would require a lot more capital also to be able to grow. So we actually licensed that solution to our partners, StarHub in Singapore. They've been selling it and successfully, and so that continued, and we get some revenue from there. But most importantly, I mean, being laser sharp focused on the automotive industry was really, really important. So that I would say that focus ended up being one really important outcome of the whole process around aligning the company and setting clear goals. It's like, as soon as you had to have two sets of goals and some of them competing for the same resources, that's when it became totally clear that we had to make a very important strategic decision around what is our product, who are our customers, and so on. That also had implications in terms of where we are located. At the time, we had a Singapore office, which we closed, because it made more sense for us to have a distributed sales team with business executives in Detroit, in Munich, so in Central Europe, in Tokyo, which we did. We have a business development office in Mountain View, California, for investor relations and to be part of the ecosystem, because a lot of the discussion around the connected car and the future of mobility is happening in Silicon Valley. And we kept throughout the whole time most of our employees, about 80% of our employees, and all of our engineering, product in Porto, Portugal, where I am today.
Sounds amazing, and it's interesting. And of course, I wanted to emphasize the courage that it took to really, especially when there is the pressure also from the market, from inside, from the team, from the investors, to scale the company. And what you are saying is, yes, the potential of the market is really, really big. It's all of this, but I will just focus on a single slice of the market for now. And this seems very simple, but at the same time, it takes a lot of courage to take this decision. And even sometimes, I would say that in this kind of transitions, when we take these tough decisions, we might lost part of our team that doesn't believe in the new direction for the company. So there is a lot of emotional attachment and emotional effort to what was being done before to serve those target markets. So what was the way that you used to structure your leadership team at this stage of growth of Veniam? So how do you structure your leadership team? That's the question.
So before going into the leadership team, you raised a really important point, which is how do you manage this change of focus in this transition, cool. And how do you justify, to people who have, put their blood, sweat, and tears into certain projects and certain business lines, and have them, commit to this new direction, or change also their career path, and that's super hard. I think one point that I always try to make is that everything we had done so far was incredibly valuable to be able to bring us to the point where we are right now, and at the same point, making clear that, what will take us to the next level is not what took us here. Right. And so, and that's, and repeating that message very often, like honoring, the past and everything we achieved before, knowing that that was necessary for us to get to this level of market understanding, to this level of brand equity, to this level, to have these networks. And in our case, it was pretty obvious that if we had not deployed city scale networks of vehicles, we wouldn't have the proof points that would lead the automakers to believe that our software was the solution they needed to put into new vehicles coming out of the factory. And it's true. I mean, Veniam now has over 90 million kilometers of connected vehicle data that gives us, a pole position to be able to define what kind of algorithms, what kind of protocols vehicles need to be able to move massive amounts of data between them and the cloud. Having said that, we did have to, say goodbye to people that we had worked with for a number of years, because the roles that they had, like running operations of deploying hardware over different vehicles in the aftermarket, or developing the hardware onboard units where our software would run, we had to stop those activities because they did not make sense after we decided to become a 100% software company and put our intelligent networking software into vehicles. So that was very hard. And it took a while to actually, get to that level of clarity. So it wasn't like, from one day to, the decision was pretty much from one day to the other, but then getting to the level of clarity of, okay, what kind of organization makes sense for this business, and in what kind of focus, and how do we, so we had to go through multiple iterations to be able to get there. And that takes me to the leadership team, because we also tried different models of, and so the way that the leadership team was structured for the previous business, and then for both businesses, and then for the 100% focus on the automotive was also not the same. For the most recent time, we had my colleague and close collaborator for a number of years, almost since the beginning of the company. Rui Costa is our Chief Technology Officer, and under his organization, he has all the activities around delivering and developing and our product and delivering, high quality software to our customers, and also managing our IP portfolio and on the other side, we have our Chief Business Officer, Jane Hoffer, which manages all of the customer-facing activities, which includes sales and business development, but also the project management, and so that part of that piece and support and the interaction. And we are in the process of recruiting a chief operating officer that can take care of the rest of the organization. For myself, I always wanted to have, obviously, technology, business, and then the operations part reporting to me. But the other key people also is the head of people and values, who reports directly to me, and the head of product management, who also reports. So product and people and values are with me, Right now, finance and G&A reports to the chief business officer, but eventually will report to the chief operating officer. So we're also a little bit in transition right now. But having that core leadership team of Jane, who and me was critical over this entire transition, and also running the business right now. But we realized we need a fourth and maybe even a fifth member in the leadership team in the foreseeable future.
Got it. And so we have covered kind of just help the audience to go through what we are discussing and scaling, how João has kind of started up Veniam. So then we discuss a little bit more what is the BIAG of Veniam, the level of clarity, the kind of strategic decisions that you needed to have the courage to take, and how it affects the morale of the team. How do you deal with that? Then we discussed a little bit the way you have kind of iterated the way you are organizing structuring your team, going through the strategic decisions that you take in order to get back to get closer to your BIAG. And maybe it's time, and you already talked a little bit about it, which is approaching execution. So we have already talked about it, the way it is so important to repeat and repeat and repeat always the same kind of things, and assuring that you are kind of practicing what you are saying that you want to do. So what are the meeting rhythms that you consider super important to assure that everyone is on the same track, on the same plan, and executing on the best pace possible?
So all our teams have daily huddles and weekly meetings. The daily huddles are 15 minutes and kind of stand up and basically more like a news flash where everybody, shares out of their calendar and schedule, what's important today, what did we learn yesterday in kind of news flash. And so we do it since our leadership team, we travel a lot and so on. We try to make it as simple as possible. So over Zoom and also sometimes just calling in from a smartphone and just going boom, boom, boom. Very, very crisp, clear communication, and trying to avoid to go too deep into each topic, but just really getting through the daily news. I love it. It's one of my favorite times of the day because you can feel the buzz of everything that is happening. And sometimes during the day, we also use Slack to just update each other, just had this meeting and learned this. I'm thinking about that. We use a term that I took out of the Turn the Ship Around, which is one of the management books also recommended in the Scaleup book and methodology, which is the Think Out Loud. So we use the hashtag TOL, Think Out Loud, for things that we're thinking of doing. And so we don't have to ask permission or authorization to do them, but we're keeping everyone informed. If someone has feedback, timely feedback, they will share it with us to help us think further. But it's not asking for permission, and it's also not just doing things under the radar without informing everyone. And that hashtag Think Out Loud on Slack is also one of my favorite parts of our methodology. The weekly meetings, so on the rhythms that we have right now is that on Monday, the leadership team meets with different functional areas. And so we have execution, people and values, and then on a weekly basis, and our own tactical meeting. In the execution, we look at the project. So there's a section that the project management office says this is where we are with each one of the projects with our customers. We also have the tech execution review, or where are we in our roadmap? How are we executing against what was planned? And just also basically during those meetings, we also get a sense of how is the team morale? What are we hearing from our different team members? What are we hearing from our customers? Then we have on Fridays, then the bi-weekly, we look at different topics, also finance and business operations, which is kind of our rocks for continuous improvement of the organization. And then we have a couple of monthly meetings, like the global sales meeting, where we meet with the salespeople, the global tech meeting, where we meet with our tech leaders. And so where essentially they can also ask us questions and on whatever they feel they need in terms of context. A super important meeting which we had yesterday is the monthly extended leadership meeting, where we have all the middle managers, where we also look at our progress in different directions, start, stop, keep. My favorite section also is that we have actually two sections. One is the core values stories, which is around our values as a company, and where people say, I nominate this person for this value because of that. And we also have the SOAR values section, which is things that we could have done better. And so that we also say, this was not good, and this is I want to do this better. So I'm really happy how this evolved, where I think we are making progress, but need to improve is being more and more KPI oriented. So for certain things, we do watch the KPIs carefully. Like right now, we have a recruiting push because we're scaling up. And so we're monitoring very carefully those numbers. But just in general, we're making an effort to become more and more also oriented towards our numbers. And then on a quarterly rhythm, we have the sales summit, which ends up being what we use for our planning, because it's our go-to-market, and then around that everything centered around the go-to-market. And we have our rocks exactly, like they are defined in also in the book on a quarterly basis, where we track on a weekly basis. We start with all of them are red, and then eventually they have to be yellow, and by the end of the quarter they have to be green, and we kind of track how are we doing along those lines. So we have those rocks also on the wall, and so people can see them in a highlighted place. We have our critical number also in a counter, so that people can see it. And we have a gong, so that we gong every time that there's some milestone is achieved. So all of that is already kind of ingrained and part of how we live in the company. And then there's the senior leadership team news, which is a bi-weekly newsletter where we just update everyone. There's a business ops newsletter, so different areas, functional areas have different ways of updating the team on what they do. And very important, of course, is our weekly all hands. So it's just quite a lot of meetings, and that's something that sometimes people say, oh, we have so many meetings, but I think once you start communicating in a crisper way, then those meetings can actually be fast-paced and fun. And so we've improved a bit there, but there's still room for improvement. I mean, one tool that I personally use also to create a tight connection with our managers and internal leaders is the Leadership Academy. And that goes back to my, core DNA as a professor, is that so I facilitate that myself. And it's a moment where groups of 4 to 6 managers sit together and just shared, over the last 2 weeks, different situations that were particularly challenging, how did they deal with that, and where we come to a sharing moment, without judging or without generalizing, on how what is working, what is not working. I'm always more interested in what is not working and how might we be able to improve it. So overall, I think that all these rhythms have now become habits. And if for some reason, we actually, I can't remember, not having daily huddles now, but if for some reason I don't, either because, something happened to the calendar or something, that immediately it feels like something is missing today. And that's how ingrained this has become into our culture.
And this is a very good point. As you said, this can be very overwhelming. First, when we start the process of trying to be super specific and super clear about what we want to achieve and kind of killing some of the goals that are distracting us, it's so difficult. So people feel this exercise is so difficult. How can I define what is my number one thing? And then it's, well, wow, what will be the implication in all of us, what we need to do? Maybe some of us would be doing completely different things, and we need to take decisions about our own life plans, about our career plans. And then after that, oh, my calendar is full of meetings where I need to kind of communicate, keep accountable, share what is happening, ask questions, be involved. And sometimes even the CEO is in a very, and going back really for the CEO role, for the driver role, it can be very overwhelming, because even in my normal agenda, I'm already so full of things. And in your case, João, traveling to Silicon Valley, Porto, to Japan, Tokyo, etc., Munich. So this can be kind of kill your agenda. And it's very tempting to say, look, I will not go to the weekly meeting because I have an important meeting with a customer or something. So how do you manage that?
Oh, so that's just not acceptable. So it's like, no, clearly. I mean, we realize that that this internal communication is so important. What one way to make that easier for us, that has worked for us, is to say Mondays and Fridays is where we concentrate the internal meetings, and that leaves like Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays almost completely free to be able to have the customer engagements and all the other, execution work that is required. For the leadership team, what requires a lot of discipline is having time to stop and think. And that's what I'm constantly insisting, with our executives, is just in all this busyness, if you don't stop and think and prioritize in what's really important. And that's why having those, kind of monthly planning meetings, and we do I forgot to mention the leadership retreat, which we do on a monthly basis, where we meet in person. I think especially when you have a distributed leadership team that is in many different countries, meeting at least, once a month, preferably I would say like every 2 weeks in person, is really important. So sometimes, when we have board meetings, Rui and I will fly to the US and meet Jane there. Other times, and Jane will come once a month over to Porto also, because she has some direct reports here. So that, live 3D meeting is really important. We've also been improving now our video conferencing technology so that we get, better quality of experience and better discussions. But yeah, it requires a lot of discipline, no doubt about that.
Got it. So strategy, people, execution. So let's go now to cash. So this is a really, as you said, deep tech field. It's a very long-term vision, a very large market, a very large opportunity, and you need to really believe on something that will happen in a decade or two, and that will be really life-changing. So how do you kind of attract the right people and the smart capital to fund a BIAG like this?
So you have all the points right. So the sales cycle is really long. The product cycle is really, really long, and it goes through multiple iterations, and you have to try many different things that really fail both on the technical side as well as on the product market and in customer engagement side. And so we went through multiple iterations of trying to figure it out. And by all means, it's still a discovery process. And so companies like ours do take 8 to 10 years to incubate. So you need, first of all, really patient investors. And we're blessed with really fantastic investors that understand that to be able to seize that huge opportunity of touching, millions of vehicles and then the lives of millions of people, you do require this much time. In terms of attracting the people, for us, it has been people that really want to do something that is meaningful and important. I think we all share the realization that climate change is real, and that is the number one threat to our way of living. And with our software and the ability, to move massive amounts of data between vehicles and the cloud, and we can help accelerate a much more sustainable, environmentally friendly mobility system and smart city ecosystem. And so when I talk with several of my team members and colleagues, that vision is very present in the why they are at Veniam, and many of them have been with us, since the very beginning for 6 years, 5 years. or more. And so that piece, I think, also in our interviews and so on, we do end up having candidates that perhaps over a period of time we're working, for an e-commerce company or something, more consumer oriented, but then realize, no, I really want to be in a company that is doing something that could be, of real value in people's lives. So that was one that's one aspect. The other one is the type of people that we aim to attract, and we do attract people who love an intellectual challenge. Both on the technical side, but even on the market side. And it's such a disruptive technology for this industry, for the automotive industry, and for future mobility, that it's people that like to ask questions and like to go deep. So depth is something that we look for across the entire organization in figuring out. But then for me, when I left the university, it was really important to create a company that not only is doing good things for the world, but also a company where people can be genuinely good with each other. And we all know, how difficult, work environments can be and business environments can be. I see there's a movement to create actually more humane organizations that, our number one core value is act selflessly. And it's this notion that, that we're there for each other. And I wrote a culture book together with our people and values specialist to actually be able to express that in as clear and practical way as possible. And so we tend to attract also people who are kind. So it's like, that's a litmus test for us, is we so far have been able to create a workspace where people can be themselves, and they don't have to wear like 5 different masks, but they can be sincere and honest, and where we try as much as possible, to have conflicts that are healthy, where people feel, okay, I've been true to myself and I've spoken out, my truth and how I see the world and how I believe it. And that takes daily work. It should never be taken for granted. And I think it will become increasingly difficult as we scale further. But that, as long as you're very explicit about who you are, why you're doing what you're doing, and how you want to go about it, then I think attracting the right people is then more a matter of hard work than really, luck. I think you can. There's a lot of luck involved in getting the right people at the right time, but this level of clarity really helps you get lucky. That's what I want to say.
Living it clear, as you said, we were kind of approaching cash. And I asked, how do you attract the right and the best people in the world for any kind of role, as an employee, as an investor, as a customer, as a provider, as a partner? And it was a very holistic answer. And we were talking about cash. So it is a very interesting point, that it's really attracting the right people.
Yeah, I go back to the initial point I was making, but just right before we kicked off the podcast, which is and again, we're a very young company. We have a lot to learn, and so these are just initial impressions that I can share. But what has become clear to me throughout the last few years is that you really have to build this huge coalition of goodwill, a huge number of people. You mentioned investors, customers, of course, partners, and team members. And friends, so people who basically want you to succeed. Having a clear purpose is really important, because people want you to succeed, not just because you're nice and kind. That, by the way, plays a really important. They have to like you. Investors have to like you as a person. So that's the other thing that is really important for people to realize, is that that piece of liking you is incredibly critical to be able to get investment and do business. And so working on ourselves is really, really important. But then the other thing is buying into the vision, is saying, yeah, this is a really great story, and this is a story that I believe is important, and this company must exist. And so when you get then to the point where investors and customers say, this company must exist, and your team members say, I'm in this company because this company is doing important things. And so and that's what I would love just in general for business to be, is like that we look at every single company and we understand why this company exists. And I think companies exist to make our lives better and for society to solve its problems. And I think we have big problems in the world that we need to solve, climate change being one of them. As I mentioned, there are others. I mean, social inequality, growing populist movements, all of that, threats to democracy. So companies that are able to tackle, some of these issues, I think that that's really important. And I think that the cash then appears once you have that coalition of goodwill.
Amazing answer, and having amazing investors and raising such amazing rounds. Talking about what you talked, I think it shows a lot about your personality. We'll not too much time to also discuss your transition from academic to the business world, and I feel that we only covered kind of 1% of what we can cover here and extract here, namely how to define the rocks, what are priorities, etc., etc. So, but I will ask a final question before giving back the word to Ryan, which I believe that will have an amazing summary, which is, if you would have the opportunity to meet João Barros in 2012, if I'm not wrong, when you were starting Veniam, and you would have a very tough conversation with himself, or a very kind conversation as you prefer, what would you tell him?
Oh my, it's actually quite moving to think about it. My largest investor and closest VC, so Malik, who's on our board, he likes to talk about João 1.0, João 2.0, João 3.0, because it's different situations. I think I'm transitioning to João 5.0 now, and so looking back, I actually went into this whole journey with a lot of excitement and idealism, I have to say, but looking back today, I really did not know much about business, and there's still so much to learn. And so I think that was the biggest challenge. It was to actually realize that doing academic research and actually building a business are actually quite different. There's one commonality, which is you have to formulate the right questions and go systematically about finding the answers. But all the things that you don't control, you don't control the market and the macroeconomics, you don't control your customers, you don't control your partners, and ultimately you can lead your team, but it's still ultimately, as a CEO and as a founder, sometimes people like to think you're the boss. You're never the boss. It's like you are actually serving a huge number of people. And what I would tell my younger self would be that each of these people has a different perspective and requires a different perspective, and so being able to address the different perspectives in a very clear, crisp way is really important. And so mixing sometimes the different perspectives can actually create more confusion than clarity. And so being very, very clear is really important and very, very consistent. So that would be one point. The second point, which one of my investors, Brad Burnham from Union Square Ventures, kept telling me, and I only started to understand much later, was the importance of focus. And there's Johnny Ives, the designer of Apple, has this beautiful definition of focus. Focus is not saying no to things that you wouldn't do. Focus is saying no to things that you would love to do, and it really, really hurts not to do, but you decide not to do because there are other more important things that you need to do. And so like saying no when it really, really hurts. And the other one is really being very honest when it's not working out with people, and do it really, really early. So as soon as you feel this is not working out, address it immediately. Don't procrastinate on making difficult personnel decisions and personnel choices. Set the bar super high on how on the level of performance and deliverables, and be very, very clear about what the expectations are. So setting very, very clear expectations for everyone, for the company, for yourself, for everyone. That is super important, and I think a really important tool for that is role descriptions. So have very early on from day one, João 2012, from day one, have written role descriptions, even if it seems like everything is undefined and you still have to figure it out. And carve out time for silence. I've been practicing mindfulness, so daily meditation for almost 3 years now. That also changed my life. The other thing is get a world-class CEO coach as soon as you can. So I work with Khalid Hamid from Reboot in San Francisco for many years now. It's been tremendously helpful as well. And then the other one is don't scale up until you have product market fit. Super important.
Very good one.
So until and you only have product market fit when you have customers paying for your product. Yeah, and I could go on, but those are
yeah, and I think you could. And honestly, it's funny because you were saying part of your advice is that there's so much to learn. And Mike was like, we've only scratched the surface of 1%. So, maybe next time that we're live, we need to go live for 24 hours, just 24 hours. Actually, Mike, I challenge you. We should come up with a 24. We need to get ready. Yeah. We need to get João Barros. I tried. Maybe it's 82%. We need to get him back for a 24-hour Scaleup-a-thon. Okay.
To be the first one ever.
A lecture to the masses. So he did a great job of summing up in the end there. But if I had to sum up the entire show in 5 words, it would be focus, 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 and focus. That's it. That's it. Now, just to be fun, you know how I like building out my my words upon words. So if we were going to look at focus and we'd go down the list, the 5 elements of focus is to, 1, facilitate. And a lot of what we talked about was facilitating the pivot, facilitating the person that you're dealing with, even facilitating their departure as soon as you know. Then the second is openness. And I really like the openness that you've communicated. You have to bring everyone along with you. And consistency, probably one of the most important things across the board. And I think we said it like 16 or 17 times. I love it. We're focused on consistency. U stands for UX. And I thought of your business as like a user experience, not for your customers, but for your employees. And so the way that you're looking and developing and trying to see how the user experience goes. And I was stuck on S at the end. I'm like, what is S? And then you said, make room for silence. I'm like, that one's it. That is it. So 5 words, focus, 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 and focus. And each one of those words stands for facilitating, openness, consistency, UX, and silence.
Well done.
Well, hey, everybody, this has been a lot of fun. And so to catch these types of shows where it's really just an organic conversation and story time, really, the only thing we're missing is a fire pit and some s'mores. But you can catch other of these episodes and join us at the campfire by going to scaleupvalley.com. That is scaleupvalley.com, where you can learn how to scale up and out of the crazy valley to get the market fit, to do the right thing for what is for you. And don't forget that in all the chaos, there is silence. You just have to find it. So I'm going to stop talking now, and we'll create silence on your feed so that we're going to go away. But hey, what a great time. This was a lot of fun, and it's fun to see your educational research being translated into something that's real and solving some real problems. So thanks again, and I look forward to connecting with you and practicing your name as we talk more and more.
No, it was a great pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Bye.
And I have to press stop. I just got the notification. So we're just going to go. We're going to have some silence here. Just peaceful silence. as I find the window with the Facebook. See, this is, Facebook for me is not that easy. I have so many windows up. We should have also talked about Windows, and
what you can do is just to leave the meeting or close the show, and let's say goodbye to the audience and to each other. Thanks so much.
All right, let's do that. Plan B. We're going to pivot. I'm going to end the meeting. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye. Thank you.